Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Tuba People TV, where we talk about Arnold Jacobs all of the time. Puddles and I are in beautiful Iowa City, Iowa, at the University of Iowa School of Music, the Boxman Music Building. It's brand new, or almost brand new, music building. Beautiful. It's amazing what a flood will do. Get you a new music building, and that's really something. So if you ever have a chance to come to Iowa City, you got to come by the Boxman Music Building. And also here with Mickey Moore, who is the professor of tuba at University of Illinois.
Yes.
Wow, I can't believe it. We are sitting on a mock audition panel together, and so I had the opportunity to ask Mickey if he'd be willing to come and talk about his studies with Mr. Jacobs. So
Happy to.
So great to see you. So great to meet you yesterday. So great to see you again. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering what, when you think back to your studies with Jacobs, what led you to your studies with Jacobs?
It was very easy. When I was a freshman in college, the first orchestra I ever listened to in my life was the Chicago Symphony. Thanksgiving of 1970, and they played Chike 5. And after I heard Jake, I went, oh my goodness. I have to sound like that. I have to try at least.
Right.
So I listened to him a lot. I was afraid to take lessons, of course, but I would go up and listen, and I'd sound better for just a while.
Yeah.
And then I'd have to get another hit and go up. I still remember one of the first concerts I heard at Ravinia was in 1971. Ozawa doing an all-Stravinsky program.
Uh-huh.
And they did the Symphony of Songs, the violin concerto with Itzhak Perlman, and in admission, Jake came down to the front of the stage to talk to us.
Oh, nice.
And he was talking to all of us, and I weighed all maybe 120 pounds. He said, well, you don't look like a tuba player. I was very offended. You know, and he talked. And he had two tubas on stage the whole first half. He had an F and a New York.
Okay.
And then after he got done talking to us, he went back and sat down and picked up the York and played the loudest high G flat I ever heard, because they were doing Rite of Spring on the second half. And we also noticed that after the second half started, that the F tuba was no longer on stage. In case he wondered if we were wondering what one he was going to play. And I just, I would go listen to him all the time. I heard the orchestra play Mahler. I heard him play everything. Also, when I was a student in Illinois, Chicago Symphony came down and recorded almost every year with Schulte.
Right.
And
Cranmer Center.
And the Cranmer Center, the Follinger Great Hall. And they had a system where they'd let 20 students at a time into the recording session while people promised not to breathe.
Really? Wow.
And it was fascinating. Schulte would come in at 9 o'clock in the morning and talk, and he talked for about 20 minutes. This is what we want to do here, blah, 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 blah. And then he'd go, bam, and they start playing.
Wow.
And one of the very first ones I remember was they started right on the G up to the high E in Meistersinger at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And I assumed they're going to make the splice right after the trill.
Uh-huh.
But Jake did it like 5 times in a row. We just, okay, we're at work.
Nice.
I also saw them record Symphony Fantastique. Also, if you remember the Schulte recording of Mahler 7,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
they did that in the Great Hall. And in one of the loud sections, there was a storm outside. And if you listen with headphones, you can hear the storm.
Really?
So it's kind of neat for Mahler. And
You remember which movement the storm
I
passed?
can't remember.
Okay.
I'd have to listen to it again.
Wow. And Fantastique, was that with Roger Rocco?
Roger was playing second.
Yeah.
Actually, well, yeah, okay. Roger was, of course, nervous.
Sure.
And so he was on stage warming up, and I was there in the audience watching. Then Jake came out, and he could tell Roger was nervous, so he took his coat off and threw it down Roger's bell. They both laughed, and then Roger was more relaxed.
That's great. Always the psychologist, Mr.
Yeah.
Jacobs.
Oh yeah. Oh no, that's one of the things I learned from him a lot, was trying to psych somebody out. He psyched me out many times, and so I've used it myself with my students as a distraction technique.
Sure. Yeah. When you mean psych out, you don't mean it in a negative way. You mean it.
No.
Get them to be where they can be taught and learn. And
one of the things he told me was, beat-low's easy in pictures. He said the hard thing is that 2-octave jump in the catacombs. So the first time I played pictures, I was worried about the 2-octave jump, and not worried about beat-low.
Uh-huh.
I knew it was a lie, but it still worked.
Yeah.
He also did the same thing with me in Meistersinger. I was playing Meistersinger one time for him, and I got to the first high G in the 2D section with the cellos and the basses,
Mm-hmm.
and that G's no good. We spent like 10 or 15 minutes on that one G. Then we went the rest of the way through, and everything else was easy after that.
Yeah.
And the last time I played it a couple of years ago, I'm still obsessed about that G.
Wow.
Even though I know he was doing it just to psych me out, that's okay.
Right.
I told that to a doctoral student 30 years ago, and he said, "Well, if it's a mind game, you know it's a mind game, then it can't work." And I said, just shut up and play the tuba. You know.
That's basically what he said. Phil Farkas tells a story about one of the seasons. Phil Farkas says he would get into a rut, and he turned to Jake one time and said, what am I doing wrong? And Jake said, just shut up and blow the damn thing, or something like that.
Yeah.
And Phil said, that's all it took.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you remember? What do you remember about your initial lesson or lessons with Mr. Jacobs?
Oh.
I assume they were at South Normal, or were they at
No, at the Fine Arts.
Fine Arts Building? Okay.
Yeah, I didn't.
Oh, 76 to.
I didn't start studying until 76.
About the time you moved to the Fine
That's
Arts
when I
Building.
graduated from. That's when I graduated from Ohio State.
Okay.
And Parentoni had both studied with him, and LeBlanc had both studied with him.
Right.
So I said, well.
And those were your teachers.
And so I said, well, I might as well get over it. Actually, another thing LeBlanc started me on was the breathing tube.
Oh, okay.
You know, he didn't like the way I sounded, so he says, put this in your mouth, leave it there the rest of your life. I said, okay. And he got it from Jake, so I said, well, I might as well go study with him.
Yeah.
I was scared to death the first lesson.
Yeah.
He said, play something for me. So I played my C diatonic scale, which I've been playing for about 10 years at that point. And he said, now play me C sharp. I go, played through it, I was missing every other note. And when I looked over at him, he had a big smile on his face. And I went, D flat. And, you know, he was always teaching don't let things psych you out.
Yeah.
And, you know, it worked.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah. What do you remember with those initial?
We did the breathing stuff.
Okay.
I remember he put me on one of the machines. It wasn't one that I have now, but it was like, you know, where it has inhalation and exhalation.
Mm-hmm.
And it moved slowly enough that he could talk to me while I'm doing it. And my first inhalation was really, really bad, and my first exhalation was okay. He says, well, I'm not sure you can be a tuba player. And so I get rid of that, and I go, he says, you know, I went from like 10 to 30. He says, well, that's getting close. And I was good on my exhalation, I was like, argh! And then on my next inhalation, it was like 50, and my exhalation was about 80. And then I got really bad. He says, well, maybe you'll be a tuba player. And so I got to about 90 on the inhalation and about 90 on the exhalation. He says, okay, you'll be all right. So I still have the different versions of those tools that I make my students do it on.
Mm-hmm.
And I say the same thing to them.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I'm not sure you can breathe and play this horn.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it takes a lot of air. You know, I do that, and I also make all my students use the breathing bag and then set a spirometer.
Okay.
You know, the other toys that cost more money I have for them to play with.
Right.
So I don't make them buy them.
Right. Right. And did you notice anything? Was there any difference in your playing when you were, you know, post working on your breath?
Oh yeah,
What did you?
relaxation.
Okay.
You know, no muscle tension. That was one of the things later on when I started teaching in Illinois in '89. I had a friend who came to town to study the Alexander technique.
Mm.
And everything that she said to me in our lessons was like everything that Jacobs ever said to me. One time I asked him, I said, have you studied the Alexander technique? He goes, no. And I said, but everything you say is exactly what I learned from the Alexander teacher. You know, if I don't need that muscle, don't use that muscle.
Right.
All that stuff. And it was a quote of him. I went, okay. It was reinforcing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thankful.
That's great. And anything in your sound?
Oh, it's, you know, my very first teacher was a trumpet player.
Okay.
He taught me in the 8th grade to take my stomach and push it against my belt and leave it right there.
Yeah, I remember.
And that was the whole school of trumpet playing. So Jake says, no, that's of course the wrong way to work. I also told him that this teacher told me that our lungs feel like a water glass, one third, one third, one third.
Right.
I told Jacobs that, and he says, of course the lungs don't work that way.
Right.
So, you know, he taught me how to do it correctly,
Yeah.
easily.
Yeah.
You know, so I still work on it.
Right.
Years ago, I was playing Prokofiev 5, and in the first rehearsal with the orchestra, I didn't like my sound, and I went, so I went to my gig bag and pulled out my breathing tube. I had on a little string that I could put around my neck,
Yeah.
put it in my mouth, and left it there for all 4 rehearsals.
Yeah.
On the concert, I sounded wonderful. And I go, maybe I should remember this. You know, so anytime someone doesn't sound good, I said, you got your breathing tube? Put it in your mouth.
Right.
Feel it. You know, get your tongue down.
Right.
I was always tight in the oral cavity.
Right.
You know, I was pretty good, like I said, on the exhalation, but on the inhalation, I wasn't working nearly as well
Okay.
as I should. And it's like, okay, suck it all in.
Get it out. Mickey, you studied with Mr. Jacobs, I think you told me 76 to 86.
Yeah.
And talk about that initial lesson or two. Why did you come back, and what was it that you that you learned? What were some takeaways?
As everyone knows, he's just an inspiration. You know, in '76 I lived in Virginia, and in '78 I moved to Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm driving all the way from Mississippi up to Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, I'd make sure I went for a concert, and I'd have a lesson. One time I came up with a trumpet friend of mine from my faculty in Mississippi, and he had a lesson with Chickowitz, and I had a lesson with Jake. And, you know, it was one time that he knocked on Jacob's door about 10 minutes before the lesson was over, and Jake says, "Okay, you can come in. There's only 10 minutes left." This is back when he wouldn't let you record your lessons or do anything else. And, you know, I'd get in the car after my lesson, I'd sit there and I'd start writing notes to myself and go, "Okay, I got to remember this." And my trumpet player friend says, as we were driving back, he says, "Well, you know, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm processing. Leave me alone. I got to try to memorize all this stuff so I don't forget it."
Right.
And you know, it was just like that. One of the things that I really got from him was attention to detail. You know, I mean, he was always playing incredibly beautiful phrases, but he would make me stop if one note was not as good as all the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he taught this to LeBlanc. He says, "What note did you miss? Why'd you miss it? How are you going to fix it?" Then he also said, "Tell me 3 different ways to say it to a student." And I still do that with my students.
Mm-hmm.
You missed something, what was it? Because if you don't know what it was, then you can't fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Now you know what it is, what'd you do wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have the wrong fingering down or what? Mm-hmm. And then, you know, now say 3 different ways. And I've done that to one of my students many times. I had a student who teaches in Arkansas, and he said I told him in his lessons that you got to come up with at least 4 different ways to say blow more air. And I was playing a recital for him about 5 years ago, and he said, "You know, when you told me that, I thought you were crazy." He said, "You're wrong. You have to come up about 10 different ways to say blow more air," which I agree. You know, so.
That's pretty good.
Also, when I got to Illinois, I had problems with sleep apnea and snoring. I had spent many nights on the couch. And so I went to your nose and throat guy, and this guy says, "Oh, there's a whole new technique called laser surgery. My soft palate's about 50% larger than it should be." He says, "I want to do laser surgery." I said, "Let me do a consult." So I called up Mr. Jacobs.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "My ear, nose, and throat guy wants to do laser surgery." He says, "Sounds great as long as it doesn't touch the soft palate." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Well, that's what makes the seal. You can go for a high note, and the seal breaks, and it's going to get air out your nose."
Right.
So I went back to the ear, nose, and throat guy and said, "No laser surgery." So I got a CPAP machine that works just as well. So I thank him for being around to still answer that question. Or, you know,
Yeah.
if I'd let the doctor do his surgery, I might be leaking out my nose.
Yeah, he was amazing. He really kept up with all the journals. I remember I was married in 1990, and a year later my wife was diagnosed with hepatitis C, and at that point, hepatitis C was there wasn't much known about it. It was just identified a couple, 3 years earlier, and I told him about that on the phone, and he proceeded to tell me all about it.
Oh yeah.
It was like he was a liver physician, you know, a hepatologist. It was amazing. He kept up on all the literature. It's pretty incredible.
That's remind me of there's a man that I met in Illinois, in Decatur, Illinois, named John Hubbard, who was a bass trombone student in Indiana. And he stopped and became a neurosurgeon because he said, "Well, you know, if I make a mistake on stage on the trombone, I can't go back and fix it." He said, "If I make a mistake in surgery, I can go back and open them up." So he did his internship in Chicago and got to know all the brass players in the Chicago Symphony.
Yeah.
And so all the musician friends would say, "No, you don't know the guys in Chicago Symphony. You're just lying." So then one time the Chicago Symphony came and played a concert in Decatur, and he's standing there in the lobby. Herstuff walks by and says, "So where are we going for dinner?" And so he took the whole brass section to dinner after the concert. So he was fascinating to tell me stories about, you know, he studied all kinds of trombone with Kleinhammer, and, you know, knew Jacobs very well.
Yeah.
And
That's neat.
you know, there was so many connections with Jacobs and everyone. He never forgot anything, and always, like you said, knew everything about any kind of medical issues.
Right. He did. That's amazing. And other people who I've interviewed have mentioned this as well. Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Well, I had a doctor friend who studied with me in Springfield, Illinois, and we were talking about respiratory function. He said, "You know more about it than I do." And I said, "Well, Jacobs knows more than I do. You know, but you know, they study all the parts, but they don't get into detail like Jacobs did."
Right. Jack Schatz, in his interview, tells a really interesting story about how he was harboring an illness in his body, and how Jacobs more or less diagnosed it without knowing that he had diagnosed it. It's really interesting. Mickey, I'm wondering, you had a 10-year period of study with Jacob, so that's really excellent. During that 10-year period, did you notice any migration or evolution or change in his pedagogical style, or how he approached things, or what he talked about?
Well, I think everybody, when they start to study with Jacobs, they're thinking about the breathing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's world famous for this, and he gives you that because he figures that's what you want. And I think he even figures that okay, some people come for 1 or 2 lessons, and that's all he'll give them. But I kept coming back and kept coming back, and we just call him up and say, okay, I want to have another lesson. And what I loved was after a while we stopped talking about that and we started talking about phrasing. We started talking about music. Started talking about you should know exactly what everyone in the orchestra is doing while you're playing your part with them. And those were the ones that I enjoyed the most. Mm-hmm. The first thing I ever played for him on F-tuba was the Gregson Tuba Concerto.
Oh.
And he started thinking in incredibly long phrases, and some people don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, I think he taught me to think in long phrases. And, it's better for the music. And those were the enjoyable. I mean, I still like the breathing. The breathing totally changed my physiology. But, he was an incredibly wonderful musician, just to listen to the voice. When I call him on the phone, Mr. Jacobs.
Right.
And it's like inspirational. And, I bought that recording where he's practicing downstairs in the basement. And he starts talking, and I go, every time I listen to that, I go,
I know, it's his on-air voice.
Yes.
His performer voice.
So that was I really enjoyed that in the lessons. He was always talking about, it's all about the music. And, he made it very easy, very inspirational, and then just to get to listen to it.
That's the thing. A lot of people, he is remembered more as this breathing person and not really as a musician necessarily, at least from a teacher standpoint.
Yeah.
And the breathing was ancillary. The breathing was was the electricity, this analogous to the electricity in the PA system that allows you to get the ideas out to the audience. So the idea is the music, and the electricity is just the method that allows those ideas to be amplified. The electricity isn't the idea; it's just the method.
One of the most important things I remember too, because I just watched some videos last night of with Schulte in Chicago.
Yeah.
Doing all of Wagner. I saw Meistersinger.
Right.
And I have to say, and I can say this on every tuba player in the world, they sound better live than they do in recording. I think recording devices have gotten much better, but you've never heard anything until you heard someone play it live. And I will never forget the time I heard Jake play live the first time.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my.
Yeah.
And I've heard that the Nevsky recording almost comes close because there's a mic right over above his bell.
Right.
He warned them about it, and they said, "Oh, that's for the chorus." He said, "Okay."
You don't want to turn it down?
Also, when he did the Symphonie Fantastique, I had a friend of mine who was working in the recording studio with the London engineers.
Yeah.
And they put Jake at the very back of the orchestra with Roger Rocco, and then a mic just for them. And they said, "Mr. Jacobs, this mic is for you." And he said, "Okay." And then my friend, when they started the Dies Irae, my friend in the recording booth said they took the mic and turned it all the way off. So Jake was coming in on the cello mic.
Wow.
50 feet at the front of the stage. I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
He sounded better live. Everyone sounds better live.
This is true.
So I love recordings. Recordings are great, but it's always better live.
Yeah, I think the first time I heard him was fall of '81, and my first CSO concert was they opened up with Lohengrin, Prelude Act 3. So that was pretty spectacular. And then getting to hear him in my first lesson play the tuba was it pretty much was a recalibration. I thought I knew what beautiful and gorgeous and full and resonant and rich was, and then he played the tuba, and it was not at all like the picture I had in my mind. It was completely off the charts, and it was not necessarily beautiful. It was beautiful. It was really beautiful. It was amazing, but it wasn't beautiful in this velvety kind of way. It was so full of stuff.
Oh yeah,
full of stuff that's what got it out to the edge of the hall. the audience, and that was one of my first lessons of stage makeup concept with sound.
Yeah.
And so, when you look at somebody who's backstage, an actor or actress, they're all made up and they look really hideous, but from the audience they look normal. So the sound up close was just so rough and gritty. And when I had a chance to sub in the CSO to hear Mr. Herseth, that was similar.
Yes.
Similar sounds, up close. And then, but out in the hall was just really gorgeous and resonant and rich.
I had a friend who was a band director in Chicago, and he was about Jacob's age. And he was having a lesson with Jacobs on stage at Orchestra Hall. And my friend was a real jokester, and he was a Dixieland tuba player. He was great. And he turned to Jacob and says, "I think my sound's better than yours." And Jake says, "Well, your sound's really good." He says, "But I have to get my sound from me here to the back row of upstairs." And so that's the difference. And he told me the story, and he knew he was joking with Jake. But I still think of that. And when I'm sitting on my stages, I'm thinking about projecting my sound to the audience in the back. And it's not a volume thing,
Right.
It's a core.
Yeah, it is cool.
And I'm a firm believer in lip buzzing, mouthpiece buzzing, not just the lips.
Right.
But that's where the sound is made. And like you said, lots of stuff in the sound, not airy.
Right.
And sometimes I get students who don't get it, and I said, this is not about your instrument, this is not about your equipment, this is about how you produce it.
Right.
And I'm going to work on that, making you more relaxed, making more focused to the sound. And then, you pick your equipment, and I don't care. I've never been very picky about what they play. I just try to make them play more easily.
Right. Yeah, a lot of times what I hear these days, maybe not just these days, but I've noticed more these days perhaps, is the sound is really much smaller than the bell. The sound that's coming out of a particular student, some students, it's really not maximizing the diameter width of the tube actually.
Yeah.
It's very much smaller, and so the big tuba is amplifying it, but it's not. You're not really maximizing from an efficiency standpoint what that instrument actually could sound like.
Yeah. Well, I tell all my students, your job is to fill the room, but it's not a volume issue.
Right.
I heard him play incredibly softly.
Yes.
But I could still hear him and knew what he was there. I don't know if you remember, which one is it? One of the Wagners. And in the opera version, it might be Siegfried's Funeral music,
Yeah.
something like that, but ends on low E.
Yeah.
And the concert version ends on just bottom line E, but the orchestra opera version ends another octave lower. And he played that pianissimo, and I could still hear it. It was just fantastic. Also the low E flat in Heidelberg at the end. I could hear that. It's like, that's what, it's not a matter of volume, it's just a matter of making sure that you're present. And he was incredible at that. And
Yeah.
I try to imitate that.
Vicki, there you were talking about phrasing and attention to detail, and every note is important. I think that is something that is so true about what he did. Every single note had intention.
Yes.
Every single note had meaning. Every single note that he played had information that was making its way to the audience. It was part of his story. Would you agree that every note was that way?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's everything you play speaks to the audience. My students have asked me sometimes, how do you decide where you're going to breathe? And I said, well, the music tells me where it wants me to breathe. And I do the phrase the way I think it should work, and if that doesn't work, then I'll take another one somewhere else. But every single one I play, beginning, middle, and end, has to be great. Will Blanc, my teacher at Ohio State, said, audiences might forgive you just about everything, except for the first note and the last note, because they'll remember those. And so you have to be ready. And Jacobs would tell me, okay, why'd you miss that note? It was the first note after a breath, or I missed the note before the breath because I'm thinking about taking the breath. And it says, no, they all have to be good. And that's the way they have to be. Our job is to make every single note we play important to the music. I was playing a concert in Venezuela with a quintet, and you know, those times when something feels really good and you can walk on water and everything's great. And I was just having a good time. I'm with my friends. We're having a great time. And the guy who brought us in was a violinist. And after the concert, he said, "Oh, that was really wonderful." I said, "Thank you." He said, "No, you don't understand. I went to Eastman. That was really fantastic." I said, "Thank you." He said, "No, you don't understand. I played the trumpet and also." And he says, "And whenever you were playing something to support the quintet, you were right there supporting the quintet. If you had a solo, you soared over the top of it." And I said, "Well, that's my job." You know, and that's always to it. I'm very happy to sit there on the bottom and support everyone else when that's my job. And if it's my job to be the solo, then get out of my way. And, you know, and I heard that from him all the time. I mean, you can listen to him playing long tones, and they're still important because they have direction.
They have direction. They're not.
You know.
They're not in the way.
No.
But they're adding to. They're not just sitting there or detracting somehow.
Yeah, it's part of the whole sound of the piece. And without you, it's diminished. The piece is not as good.
Right.
I've had students who told me that they weren't important, and I said, "No, the ensemble's different. If you're not there, the ensemble's not as good." And I want you to always remember that.
Right.
I also never asked him this, but I firmly believe it. I mean, how many times can you play the Dvorak New World and be interested? But I always felt like from the very first time I ever heard him, I think every time he sat down on stage, you knew somebody was there who'd never heard him play before, and he wanted to knock their socks off. And I was jumping up and down in my seat that first concert, and was jumping up and down and going, you know, some of my friends who were with me, you know, were not tuba players, were going, "What are you so excited about?" And I said, you know, I think he was very in tune to making someone appreciate that they were there, and just happy they were there.
Yeah. I remember in a lesson, I don't know what we were playing. It must have been something that I was doing that prompted this from him. But he said, "You know, Mike, somebody's always listening to you."
Oh yeah.
And it could be something as important as a Mahler symphony, or something as you would seemingly think, maybe, Mike, maybe a Susan March or something. But there is always somebody, at least one person, listening to you, and you want to make sure that you give them their money's worth.
Oh yeah.
And I thought, okay, you know, this is one of many, many lessons, and I thought, okay, Mr. Jacobs, and then fast forward a couple of years, I was doing a concert down Charleston, South Carolina, and somebody found me. I was the sub tuba player. Somebody found me after the concert outside. They had to go to effort. They came and found me and thanked me for how I played that part. They really were they were entertained by it. You know, it meant something to them. And I thought, wow, he was right.
Well, you know, we sit in the back and we try to do our job, but I can't not think of how many friends of mine in the string section have thanked me for being there, being in tune, and being on time.
Right.
And keeping the pulse going for the orchestra and the pitch going for the orchestra. And I go, no problem, that's my job.
Right.
You know, and I take that job very seriously. You know, I'm going to go with the ensemble, not with the percussion section, and just, you know, try to keep everything going.
Right.
Because, you know, we can also, as many times as I played Maestro Singer, there's always a couple little passages. It's not in the solo section that everybody worries about, but when you're playing the counter melody for the horn section in the first page. And most conductors will go into 2 instead of singing 4. Yeah. And they look at me and say, "You're supposed to push the whole orchestra." And I said, "I'm just one little guy." But I will go into 2 to go with them and try and do it and keep the energy going.
Right.
You know, I heard him do that on the recording. You know, so.
Well, that's great. Yeah, importance, musical intentionality, musical importance. That was the thing.
Oh yeah.
That was the thing. Well, Puddles, I can't thank you enough for giving us your time, especially on such short notice.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, very thankful, and we want to give you 2 things. We have the Collector's Tuba People TV.
Ooh, all right.
Glass.
I'll probably use it tonight.
And then this Tuba People TV pen.
Oh, thank you very much.
It's not an insignificant pen. It has a good weight to it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's very good. Mickey, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching Tuba People TV.
Oh, I've seen them all. You know, and
you're the one.
Many times.
Boosting our ratings. Thank you. And now back to you.